This is the Love and Light Podcast, episode number 60. And we're going to talk about something that is, it's hard.
Yes.
It is a very, very hard topic. And it is 2026. Mm-hmm. And this young man, Nolan Wells, mm-hmm. was, I believe, and we will see, something tragic happened. Rather, he was murdered or it was an accident that has now become a major issue nationally. We're going to talk about that, and we're going to take a deep dive into all the little things that are coming out about this particular case, and remind you of what happened to Emmett Till many, many years ago. And so we're kicking it off with the Love and Light Podcast, episode number 60, powered by 103.9 WDKX.
This is the case that woke a city, a country, and why Nolan Wells matters in 2026. We welcome you once again to the Love and Light Podcast, our 60th episode. Before we get into this particular segment, we want to talk about the love lifting segment, and I think it's befitting to lift up a soldier, a community advocate, someone who's not afraid to speak truth to power, and that is Attorney Ben Crump. We need 100 more Attorney Ben Crumps in our world. And so we want to take an opportunity to pause and lift up Attorney Ben Crump and or all attorneys and or advocates who are not afraid to stand up, speak truth to power, and to interject themselves into injustice and call for justice in all cases.
Right. Absolutely. So who was Nolan Wells?
Who was he?
Nolan Xavier.
Say
Wells.
His name. Yes.
He was 18 years old. He was going to play football in college in the fall. His mother called him a bright light. He was a peacemaker, a kind young man who wanted to be friends with everyone in the room. You know, when I heard about this story of Nolan, you know, washing up on shore, you know, having been allegedly with his friends, spending the day with them and never coming home, and being the only one to never come home, and no one calling his parents, no one giving them any information. I automatically, hair stood up on the back of my neck and my stomach began to hurt because I knew that something was wrong.
So let's paint the picture so that people, because there's still a lot of people who they heard of it, it's come up on their feed, they've heard the name, they know something's weird going on, but they may not know a lot of details. So we want to give you some details in this episode. It was the 4th of July.
Yep.
They were on a place called Horn Island. It's a remote, uninhibited barrier island, 11 miles long, 7 miles off the Mississippi coast. There's no shelter. There was no communications. Roughly 200 people were celebrating. Nolan Wells was there with so-called quote unquote friends from high school, and they were all white. I'll be very particular and specific about this situation. He was the only black man in the group. Now I want to pause there, Lovely, because that hit different for me, because I've been in those types of situations. When I was in the military, in the Air Force, most people that are in the military, typically, especially people of color, typically when I meet another, especially young black male, and I say, "Oh, I was in the military," they say typically they say they was in the Navy, in the Army, or in the Marines, right? Very seldom do I run into another, and it happens, but very seldom, because it's not as common as the other, that I meet another person of color that was in the Air Force. So I was in the Air Force. I was the only African American in my unit, and was the entire time when I went into the fire department. Typically even in Rochester, going to the different firehouses. Now there were other black firefighters, but there always was like maybe one per firehouse. So I was always typically worked alone with an all white crew. So I just wanted to pause for those who can understand and relate. Whether it's in school, whether you're on a sports team, I know your daughter plays lacrosse, whether it's you're in a rural area or something like that, and know how it feels when you're the only person of color in that environment.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't feel
it
great.
Hit different.
It hit different.
Yeah, it hit a little different.
Been the only person of color in the room many times.
Yes.
And learning how to navigate that and to do what we call code switching and being diplomatic, right? You know, you have to, and I'm sure that Nolan knew how to do that. Unfortunately, there's no one that will tell the full story at this point in time of what happened to him.
So let's tell them what they say happened.
Okay.
So approximately 3:00 in the afternoon, the last confirmed sighting of Nolan alive. His quote unquote friends got on their boat and they left Horn Island without Nolan. They left, and the sheriff office and said Nolan chose to stay. That's what the sheriff. That was the report from the sheriff's office, that he had planned to get a ride back with someone else. That he chose to stay on an uninhibited island with no shelter, no communication. An 18-year-old college football player chose to stay, they said.
Yeah, and a good swimmer.
Yeah,
right. He was a good swimmer,
and he was a good swimmer. He was an athlete. And here's what his friends took with them when they left: his phone and his keys. Christine Wansley reported him missing, which I believe is his mom, if I'm not mistaken. In early morning hours of July 5th. On July 6th, a National Park Service ranger found Nolan's body on the northwest tip of Horn Island along the shore. He should have been getting ready for football camp. He should have been calling for his mother, but in this case, he was found dead.
Right.
So the question is now. Go ahead.
What point I want to make is that his friends say they left him. They took his keys. They took his phone, and they left him there. Right. But none of them, when they got back, called his mom to say, "Hey, listen, we have Nolan's phone. We have his keys." You know, nothing. None of that happened. Right. So I'm thinking, if it was one of my daughter's friends, right?
Yes.
And they left with her, right? And they're not coming back with her. Then they're coming back with her items that when they get back to the mainland, they would call and say, "Hey, listen, Miss, such and such, can I drop off, Nolan's things? I have his items. He's gonna come back later." None of that happened.
That's the first part right there that just baffles anybody to hear that.
But listen how his mom actually located his phone, right? Because with technology, it is good, right?
Sure.
Because on our phones, parents have this app called Life 360. So that is how she literally tracked the phone to his friend's house. That's where she learned that allegedly he was coming back with somebody else.
Now, okay, so it's in episode 60. We're talking about Nolan Wells. It's very difficult stuff to talk about, but we got to talk about it because it's stuff that we need. It's a lot of lessons to learn in this. And so before we can even get to his mom, what she did, locating the phone, I still got issue with the fact of the friends leaving. Whenever we went coming up anywhere with friends, what's the code? The code is we came together, we leave together. That is
our code.
That is the code. That's our code, and
right.
That's the difference when you're the only one, the person of color, in these types of situations, because it goes against everything we were ever taught when we go out. And now that's a code if we're going to like some local place. Right. You know what I mean? Together. Imagine going to a secluded island on a boat, right? And I'm going to leave. And I'm going to
that you grew up with,
and
people that you're friends with.
And then it's secluded. So your keys, I get that. As far as that's not that important when you're on an island, but the phone,
right?
Where there's no communication on the island, like you gotta have your phone. And so not to secure, and I remember listening to Judge Mathis, I believe, who's been giving some commentary around all of this, and he's going like, look, you won't take the time to say, hey, how you gonna get back, bro? Like, how you getting back? Oh, the claim that he was going with some other person, and okay, is that person bring you back? How you gonna call that person? How you gonna
It just doesn't. It just logically
doesn't make sense. Then now the mother did what she did, and they family members, her husband and family members went to the guy's house. They go to the guy's house to retrieve his phone and keys, because apparently, if I remember correctly, the car was also parked,
I believe so,
nearby or at this house. And so when they go there, they tell them, we don't have none of that. We don't know what you're talking about, right? Then it's overheard that somebody in the house, a female, says, "Oh no, the keys are on the Xbox or the game," and sure enough, that's where they were. Which also further lets you know that something in this case was definitely going awry, and it was not. A lot of untruths have been happening, and statements were not adding up.
I mean, rather it was an accident or not, we don't know. But at the end of the day, it just seems like a complete, cover up or fabrication of a lot of different facts. So
a lot of stuff.
Okay, the phone, you find the phone. The phone's at the house. He's not there. Nobody knows where he claims to know where he's at, and then you have this situation where there is an autopsy, right? And an autopsy, after his body washed up, there's an autopsy. And of course, the autopsy performed by the,
Dr. Roger Mitchell, I think, was the first one that performed. He did an independent autopsy.
Right. So the first autopsy listed his cause of death as undetermined. Undetermined. Right.
Not accidental.
And the second autopsy, because as a family, you can get an independent autopsy.
Yes.
And that autopsy was performed by Dr. Roger Mitchell. And they noted that there was red discoloration on the back of Nolan's skull.
On the back of his skull, yes.
It was flagged as inconclusive and needed further investigation, not drowning, not accidental, undetermined.
And the reason they could not determine drowning with the second independent autopsy, and you gotta be very clear, people gotta understand this,
right?
Because when the body was given to the second person doing the second autopsy, that particular doctor, it was missing certain critical parts. Parts of the throat, the lungs, where water would have been inside of his lungs if he had drowned. There were liver, which also would have showed some significant signs of drowning, etc. There were certain parts of his body which is just ridiculous.
And I heard that the neck.
Yes.
Right. So if he had fallen and or something had hit him on the back of the neck, right, and that part is removed, the independent autopsy wouldn't be able to see that.
That's right.
And the same thing with the lungs, the same thing with the liver. Certain aspects that would give a conclusive determination of what actually happened to him. The independent autopsy could not determine that because these key elements of evidence were missing
gone
from this young man's body.
Right.
Family had no idea, did not give permission. And, but you also have to understand that the people that he was with, his friends, are all well-to-do families, come from parents that are judges, that are in law enforcement,
and had lawyered up.
That I mean, so this is a complete mess.
It's a complete mess. So before because I want to move into the history of Mississippi, because we can't. This is not a new thing for this particular area, right? So, but before we do that, I want to go back to that phone because we missed the point there. Also, in his phone, messages were deleted. That's a very, very, very important factor of, okay, let's just say it was an accident, or let's say they did leave them, but they took the phone and all that. Why are messages deleted from his phone? But let's talk about the history. The history, we can't talk about Nolan Wells, and we're saying his name today in a historical vacuum because it's happening in Mississippi, and Mississippi has a history. And that history is not ancient. It lives in folks' bodies. And when we talk about that, we talk about Emmett Till. 14 years old, murdered in Mississippi in 1955, acquitted in just over an hour. Medgar Evers' assassination in his own driveway in 1963, and I visited his home when I was in the city council, the national black elected officials. We took a trip to Jackson, Mississippi, and I met his brother was one of the first city councilmen there, and his daughter, and we also have Cheney, Goodman, and Schwerner in 1964, killed with the complicity of local law enforcement. The history of Mississippi and the history of racial violence in America is not separate conversations.
It's not separate. And the thing about it is that when, we're talking about Nolan Wells today, but if you think about over the last 2 to 3 months, and nobody is really talking about this, the number of black young people that are being found hung in the South. It is unbelievable.
And we've even had on our show, on some of our earlier episodes, where we talking about all of the missing children, black children that we have locally, even locally, not just in the South, but I'm sure it's all across America, but even locally, because at the end of the day, Nolan went missing, right? We have all of these missing children, that like nobody's really having a conversation about, right?
But I think that, and I think that it is so important to know that we're shining a light on this particular issue and this particular young man, Nolan Wells, because this is something that we need to pay attention to. And the nation is paying attention to it, and they are responding because of the fact that this happens over and over and over again to our young black kids. And from Emmett Till, 1955 to now 2026, the same thing is happening. And it is the system that are supposed to be protecting them that is failing them right now, because this autopsy was performed by a government official, right? The first autopsy, right? So when we think about, okay, now what is happening with the evidence that is being collected or talked about? These are all independent fact-finding things. That's not the police department or the law enforcement or the governmental entity that's taking care of it. It is independent people that are coming up with this information, like this 911 call that DJ Sight was just talking about.
Right.
It, that was released yesterday, that shows that the story, that the original story that was told is not true.
So okay, that right there, and Ben Crump asked it plainly: if the roles were reversed, if there was 3 young black men on the boat with 1 young white man who ended up dead, how differently would this investigation look? Right? If you had conflicting stories,
right,
with 3 black men, conflicting stories, and a white dead young kid, right, and these conflicting stories would be enough to not only arrest those individuals, bringing them in, holding them for questioning, but none of that has been done.
Right. But as I said, it's the system, right? So when you talk about Mississippi having a history of, doing this or protecting, people that have really done some heinous things to black people, it is not far-fetched to see that the system is the problem, right? Because from the autopsy to the investigation to what's happening, and the fact that the family is, these young men come from prominent families, they're all lawyered up, and here you have this young man, Nolan Wells' mother, who can't even go to work because people are, calling her and talking about murdering her and talking about letting this go, and she didn't do anything wrong. And the only thing that she wants to know is what happened to my son.
I think about that.
No other mother would let it go. I want to know, as a mother, I just want to know, just tell me what happened to my son. If it was an accident, say it was an accident, we panicked, we did this, we did that, whatever it was, tell me what happened to my son.
So I was reading this particular point, right, which is, you're really right on this point that I was reading that someone had wrote, and I read it, and I want to share it. It says when his mother gave Nolan the talk, right, she equipped him with the history. She prepared him, and he was still the kid in the photograph with his arms around his friend, smiling, trying to live in the world as it should be.
Right.
That is not naivety, right? That is courage. And the world failed him anyway, right? Now, as a pastor, I've sat with grieving families, in this city who know these types of wounds. We teach, we equip, we warn. Then we send them out in a world that does not always honor their investment. And when the worst happens, the family has to fight harder than any parent should just to get the most basic answers of what happened to my child.
Right. Yeah.
How did the nation respond to that?
Yeah.
Right? We saw Ben Crump represent the families of Trayvon Martin, George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, retained immediately, right? His team subpoena records, witnesses, conducting a full parallel investigation. Reverend Al Sharpton officiated the funeral and got involved. And my understanding is from the beginning, there was a local pastor who got with the family and started making some noise. Tyler Perry paid for the funeral. Colin Kaepernick funded the independent autopsy. Spike Lee showed up in person. Terrell Owens contributed a $125,000 reward for information leading to arrest. Do you know that there was a tip line that went directly to the judge, to one of the white judges who I believe is one of the children's parent, and she's the one listed as to call her number for the tip line? How ridiculous is that? But the beauty of it is that the nation and the village did respond, and they said, you know what? And Crump said, quote unquote, black tears are just as painful. Black pain hurts just as much. This is not a slogan. This is a demand for equal humanity, and we still are making this demand. So, when we think about why does this matter in 2026, when we ask ourselves why, and we say his name, why does Nolan Wells matter in 2026? We can see ourselves.
We see
it
ourselves.
Could be your child.
We see our children.
Right.
We see, our, as a mom, as a father, we see it. And this is not going to be the last that we hear about this story. It's not going to be the last time we talk about it, because this is not just about what's happening in Mississippi. This is about what's happening across the country. This is about what's happening in every city across America. And we need to not fail our children by sitting by silently about missing children, about children that are being hung in the South, and about systems that are supposed to be protecting them that are actually failing them. This is the Love of Life podcast, powered by 103.9 WDKX, episode number 60.
The case that woke up a city, woke up a nation. We say his name, Nolan Wells. We are praying for his family. We're praying for justice. And let's make sure that we continue to stay awake and have these conversations with ourselves, and especially with our children. May God bless you. May God keep you until we see you again. Peace.